Hey team, welcome to episode 22 of the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. Today I'm interviewing Eric Duffett from the Shot Pattern app. Shot Pattern app is a GPS tracking app, and the reason why I kind of came on to Eric was I discovered his app online, and I really liked a couple of the features that they had in the way that it gives you a realistic understanding of what your shot dispersion is, but then also how to aim that shot dispersion around the golf course. In this conversation, we talk about how it works off the tee, but also how it works hitting into greens. We talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls that players make and how we believe that the way that they aim and the things they don't understand about their dispersion can really hurt their scores. And something as simple as understanding your dispersion and where you should aim can help you shoot lower scores. Now, this isn't just for high-level players. I believe that every single player can look at the way that they play their home club or wherever they play and can aim in a way that can give them the best chance to get their ball in play. Eric talks about some things that he's learned as a high-level golfer and what he sees with amateurs that he plays with. I also share some of my own stories, but also a couple fantastic stories about some of the players that I've worked with, how I've used this in practice rounds, how I've used this to manage playing my own club, and some other scenarios like that. So I think this is a little bit of a different episode, but I think is a fantastic opportunity for you to learn about some of the tech that's available, but also even without that, just how we can aim our way around the golf course to make better decisions. So again, the name of the app is called Shot Pattern app. It's on iOS right now, and compared to some of the other options, I think it is very affordable. It's very inexpensive. It's something that I'm using every single time that I play and something that every one of my students who are part of my year-long program will get. So enough about the intro. Let's hop right in with this fantastic interview with the founder of Shot Pattern, Eric Duffett. All right, Eric Duffett, thanks for taking some time to come on the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. Looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here. And before we get started, been watching your stuff online for a while, and just thank you for your love for the game. You clearly have a passion for teaching and educating and helping players get better. So I appreciate all you do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And to be honest, I think maybe the way that we connected and what I want to talk a lot about today is there's an app that you've developed that I discovered somewhere through the social verse, and I believe it's really going to help my players solve a problem. And I think it's really going to be a fantastic coaching tool for me, both on the golf course and off the golf course. So why don't we dive in? What is the Shot Pattern app?
Yeah, so the Shot Pattern app is a golf GPS app and data tool that really strives to make your shot dispersion visual and visual in a way that you can use it to dial in optimal strategy without having to do a whole bunch of math, without thinking too hard, just in a kind of seamless drag and drop way, so that you can incur fewer penalty strokes, know when to hit driver off the tee or when to hit an iron, and really, again, make some of that strokes gained math that can get pretty complex, simple, visual, easy, to help players better understand how to play the game smarter.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Maybe just kind of if we were to describe the overview, so like you open up the app and whether you're just doing a little bit of scouting or you're playing, essentially to me, like my experience, you open up the app and you select the golf course, and like within 2 seconds, it's like bang. It's like almost as if your Google Maps on top of it.
Exactly. So that's where kind of the problem started for me. Was I was using an existing golf GPS app, and I wanted to better understand how to play better golf, aim smarter. And so I built a tool really for myself to, again, pull up a map of the golf course from that satellite image. And right when you name the golf course you want to see, it starts drawing lines on that satellite image. And there's a line to your target, like you'll see in every other golf GPS app. But where we're different is that instead of having an arbitrarily sized circle, you are going to see an arc that represents basically 95% of your shots and the width of that dispersion in an arc, so that you can see not just the single point where you're aimed, but really how you're aiming that entire spread of shots that represent the full breadth of kind of your best shots and almost all of your misses that you should really be taking into account when you when you pick a target.
Yeah, you said that absolutely fantastically. And like what I look at it from the coaching side, I know players are always basing their dispersion off of the top 5% of shots that they hit. And I spend a lot of time educating players that like when we talk about a dispersion, and I'll let you explain a little bit in a minute. But you have the ability to toggle what your dispersion is, whether it's 70 yards wide, 6 yards wide, and downwards to get a player to understand, yes, I know that our intention is to always hit the best shot that we can. But if we want to shoot the lowest score possible, we have to take into account that that may not happen and we might hit shots that are offline. And as a result, taking that dispersion into account, this is the best spot for you to aim. And the thing that I like, that arc is so uh is so well, like, I know, so simple in design but so well designed, because I like the fact you can quickly drag it in every direction. And I like the through line very quickly highlights, oh, I used to always aim at the left side of that bunker, but too often I'm hitting it in that left hazard. I've actually got to be aiming at the right side of that bunker because that fits my 70-yard arc into that range.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was born out of unfortunately the weakest part of my game. I'm 6'5". I can hit the ball a little bit in terms of distance. I'm a decent player. I'm still just a stroke or two away from scratch. But I struggle to hit the ball straight. And so it's something I learned early in my career. When I'm standing on the tee box with a caddy or with a friend or with someone who's been nice enough to invite me out to their club and they say, "Oh, you should aim it over there." I realized that I was seeing the course through a different lens than a lot of other people. One, because I was going to hit the ball further than them on average, but two, because I started to learn through a lot of penalty strokes that my target really wasn't the ideal spot to be in the fairway. It was, how do I aim this so that I can spray the ball like usual and have a chance to find it? And so um that's what I gave myself the ability to do, was know, okay, here's how I'm going to spray it. Can I hit driver here? And if so, where do I need to aim it to, number one, keep the ball out of bounds, because you really cannot score if you are taking that two-stroke penalty. And then secondarily, out of penalty hazards, the trees, and then as kind of a last checklist item, out of bunkers. But really, if you're avoiding penalty strokes and you're avoiding recovery situations, everything else is generally you can live with as a golfer.
I really like what you said about kind of you looking at it through a different lens, because it's funny, and especially when like we're now into more coaching indoor season, everyone's definition of an online or an offline shot like is actually quite different. There's some players that to them like 20 yards offline is URI's definition of like 80 yards offline.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Like it I laughed at a player once when I hit a tee shot and he goes, "Oh, where'd that one go?" I said, "Oh, it's right down the middle of the fairway." And we walk up to our ball, and I ended up probably closer to the right edge than the dead middle of the fairway. And he kind of made the comment, he's like, "Oh, I thought that was a straight shot." I'm like, "Hey, if this shot is 7 yards more right than I thought it was going to be, like, this is a perfectly straight shot. I'm in the fairway. I'm in play." I think something that I see a lot of, like, obviously, I'm really excited to use this with my competitive players, especially preparing for tournaments. I have a student of mine that in a couple weeks is going down to Florida on a course he's never seen before, and he's got the shot pattern app. And even in our lesson that we were together this past week, we were already starting to go through some holes and realizing, all right, one's probably not a driver hole. There's a huge pond on number 3. What, like, I think we can get 4-iron far enough down there while still being safe, etc. But I also think for the club level golfer, when they play the same course every single day, it's like they play with horse blinders on, and they aren't recognizing, like, when they tell themselves, "Oh, I always hit it into the trees on hole number 5." Or with something like this, they can look and say, "Well, based on my dispersion, like, of course I'm hitting it all the time in the trees. Look at where I'm aiming." I think you have a sweet piece of tech that's going to be fantastic for golfers of all levels. Do you, where do you think is the where do you think is the biggest gap when it comes to understanding strokes gained? Because I know strokes gained is, especially if you're in the golfing world, like it's something we hear a lot. But I think a lot of average golfers are like, "What the heck do you mean improve my strokes gained?" Can you maybe give me your thoughts on how you would explain that?
Yeah, to go back a little bit, I think you touched on two really interesting use cases. The competitive player who like knows to scout out the course ahead of time, they've jumped in and they've seen the value right away of shot pattern, and I love the way you're using it. That's exactly how I dial it up to come up with your strategy before you step foot on the course and really feel some comfort in knowing what you intend to do, and then being able to make slight adjustments on the fly. And then I have heard from those club players. I had a guy, he found it. He sent me an email, say, "Hey, I love this. I'm gonna go use it later today." And he emailed back a few hours later, like, "You wouldn't believe what just happened. I just tied my best score ever, and I realized that the targets I was picking on my home course that I play week after week were all off by 20 something yards, and I had 5+ shots where it normally would have been deep in the trees or out of bounds, where I found my ball, I was able to advance it. And like he basically said, it's only a matter of time before I break through and I shoot my best score ever. And it was just as simple as seeing a new visual and looking at the course differently to have better strategy. Related to strokes gained, I think you're absolutely right. When I sit in chat rooms, a Discord server, just look at different conversations happening across social, there's still a lot of confusion about what strokes gained is and how we're supposed to make sense of it. Part of that is that the PGA Tour has this like dynamic strokes gain, so you're measured against the field every single round, whereas most consumer facing apps are really measured against a benchmark expectation from any particular yardage. And so when you step on the tee of a 400-yard par four as a scratch player, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but let's just say a scratch player is going to average 4.2 strokes on that 400-yard par four. So any score better than 4.2 is going to gain them strokes against where an average scratch player will end up. So a par on that hole, across the entire hole, is 0.2 strokes gained. But what we really do is we dial that back from every single yardage. There's essentially an expectation of how much closer a player of that ability will advance the ball on any particular shot. And so we use these statistical benchmarks to quantify how good of a shot you just hit. How much closer did you just hit it to the hole? And what kind of lie did you leave yourself? And really, it's just the combination of how close are you to the hole and what lie do you have that allows us to predict essentially how many strokes it will take you to get the ball in the hole from where you are.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation, and I think, yeah, the way that we look at it on tour or on TV or whatever maybe is a lot different than the data that we're getting when we go through these apps. So I appreciate that explanation. I think that'll make a lot of sense to people. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode. If you are, I have a favor to ask. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to this channel, like this video, and make sure you hit that bell to make sure you get notified on when a new episode drops. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts, please make sure you subscribe there as well. But if you could leave me a rating wherever you're listening or watching, if you do those things for me, it really helps the podcast grow and also motivates me to put out more content. And as always, on any platform, if you ever have any questions, please reach out. Let me know. I answered every comment. Now let's get you back to your episode. I want to kind of shift to, so we've obviously talked about what we get off of the tee. And coming from a guy who spends a lot of time playing a club with really small greens, second shots and approach shots into greens. Can you describe a little bit of like, so we've hit that tee shot and let's say it's in the fairway and let's say we have the app out on our phone. What are we doing when we approach that ball? And then what does that viewpoint switch to after that?
Yeah, so you can toggle it to approach mode where it's going to toggle from being an arc shape to being a circle. And that circle you can use to essentially illustrate where your median or average shot is going to end up. And what ends up happening is that you'll see that from just about anything outside of 100 yards, in order to maximize your greens in regulation, which is a really good way to lower your score, you are not going to be aiming near the pin. You're going to be aiming in a way that gets that circle to grab as much of the green as possible so that any shot that's average or better leaves you with a putt. Hopefully it's a birdie putt because you're aiming for that green in regulation. And that's the most mathematically optimal way to play, is that any half decent shot puts you on the green and gives you a chance to put the ball in the hole with your next stroke. And I think players will be shocked at what that circle looks like in comparison to, I mean, a small green size, it's like game over. It might really take a lot of time and a lot of thought away from the player, like, aiming at the center once again. But I think in general, even on large greens, it can be a really surprising and informative exercise to see what a 30-foot radius looks like around a target, because front, middle, back, the target only changes a few yards in order to maximize those greens of regulation.
Yeah, I was as I was going through my home club, we have 3 9, so 27 hole facility, and it was like 22 of the greens are like middle, right? Like middle of the green in both directions. And I think what you said is so spot on, where the amount of players that make bogeys solely based off of where that pin position is, where when they're in the fairway, they all of a sudden go from I'm my 10 handicap golfer to I'm Tiger Woods in the year 2000. And like, I want the yardage, like including the 4 inches to the bottom of the cup. And that becomes like their yardage, right? Where I love how you said, like, a huge takeaway for players should be when you're playing this game to try to maximize the amount of greens in regulation that you hit. And now, if you have a device that can tell you in real time based on, let's say, roughly your average proximity, where you start to aim that spot, even if you're playing small greens or even if you're playing clubs with monster screens, we can take some of the guessing out and say, like, based on everything we know, this is where we must aim to give us the best chance to hit the screen, regardless if we hit a good shot or not, right? Because I think oftentimes, as soon as a player has a slight miss hit, they've missed that green.
Yeah, and I just tweeted out an image this past weekend of what it looks like for the average player trying to hit TPC Sawgrass number 17, and what a 30-foot radius would look like, which pretty closely matches what a scratch player can expect from 135 yards, and what a 50-foot radius looks like, which is pretty close to a 10 handicap. And both of those players are aiming in pretty much the same spot, and that is that middle point on the green,
Yeah,
where like they still have to hit a really good shot aimed at the dead center of the green to make sure that they avoid the water.
yeah.
And so it doesn't matter if that pin is back right or front left, it's their target really doesn't change. And if the ball doesn't splash, they have hit a terrific shot.
Yeah, I think the like the Sergio Garcia shot and the Ricky Fowler shot have just done golfers such a disservice because when they see that right pin or on Sunday, they're thinking, oh, I can definitely carve it into that little, like, what looked like a 4-yard circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if
So
it ends up over there, hopefully it was an accident.
yeah, for sure. Um, so we've talked a little bit about understanding a player's dispersion. What does shot pattern have right now to help a player figure out what their dispersion is?
Yeah, so this was something we added a few months ago. So at first it was just, here are some lines on the screen, and you had to come into the app knowing your shot dispersion. And I quickly realized the app was originally designed just for me, and I threw it up on the internet. It's just like, hey, let's see what happens. That all of the advice I was hearing about, hey, like your driver dispersion is 70 yards wide, and this is essentially the advice for players on tour. All the advice was for players on tour, and knowing my own game, I just knew that that wasn't true for me, and I needed a way to discover what my shot dispersion was. So we have two ways that you can do that in the app. You can measure your shots real time while you're on the course. So you stand on the tee box either right before or right after you hit your ball. You indicate the point where you aimed it. You tap to start measuring. You walk to your ball. You tap again, and we'll tell you how far you hit the ball and how far offline you were. And immediately it'll start calculating a prediction for where the spread of where 95% of your shots will land. And really that's two standard deviations in each direction. Most people playing golf don't want to hear about standard deviations, so we just say here's where 95% of your shots are going. I think
Right.
That makes it simple enough for people. But the cool thing we added over the summer that people have really come to enjoy is the ability to upload data from a launch monitor. So if you have a launch monitor that can export data to an Excel file, and that launch monitor is advanced enough to give you offline left and right, then really quickly, you can take one or two range sessions and we can build out your dispersion with fairly decent accuracy, because we want to have 50, 100 shots with any club. And so the fact that you don't have to play enough rounds to see 100 shots with your driver, 100 shots with your 3-wood, 100 shots with your 2-iron, which some people, that would take an entire season.
Yeah.
We can get that from a handful of range sessions. And now you can walk on the course saying, okay, I know my driver dispersion is 80 yards. My 3-wood is 75 and my 3-iron is 60. And now you have some really powerful confidence when you step on the course and you're dragging that cursor around. On one hand, you would think like, oh man, to see that it's that wide, it might feel draining at first, but there's an incredible like relief in knowing like, okay, this is the truth. And I know that when I aim this, like it is centered between hazards. And I know for certain that like when I swing the club, I don't have to hit it perfect. I just have to hit it in my normal range, and that's going to be okay. And because it kind of forces your hand to aim in accordance with your dispersion, what I found is that there are some of these miraculous moments where I've hit a really bad shot. I'm like, oh God. And then like you have that feeling of dread as you're walking or driving to the ball, like, oh, I think it's out. And then shit, like it's there, it's in by 3 yards, 5 yards. And I had this past fall. I have a 3-month-old baby, so my golf game came to
Well, you're not playing much.
halt. Exactly. And so I had to go out for a couple last competitive rounds for the league I was in, and it was incredible, like just to hit these shots that were far below my ideal, and yet there it was, just inside the hazard line. And over the course of a couple competitive rounds, it must have been 5 or 6 penalty strokes that were avoided just because I knew what to expect out of my own game. I knew how far away from those hazards I had to aim. And then when it was a terrible shot, bottom 10% for what I'm capable of, it was still in play.
Yeah, and I think the point of having that dispersion is understanding that if we're aiming properly, obviously our best shots are going to be in play, but a real opportunity, especially when we're talking competition, is how do we find that bottom 20, 30% of our golf shots, and how do we get those in play? And something that you said that I think is really interesting is if we give players a tool where it's like, okay, we have the data to know what your dispersion is. Now we're going to take the guesswork out of aiming, because the amount of times that we see players maybe have a lackluster pre-shot routine, and as a result, they stand over the ball and they just keep looking and looking and then they adjust, right? Like they're really wearing themselves down, stressing over, am I aiming in the right spot? As opposed to saying, I have some data. It's in real time. This is the course I'm playing. This is the tees I'm playing today. With that, aiming at that tree or that edge of the bunker or that part of the fairway, gives me the best chance to get this in play. Now that work is done, I can get up to my golf ball and I can just focus on, let's go through my process and let's execute this golf shot. And I, both personally and for my players, I'm looking forward to using this more to kind of giving them that confidence to say, based on what we know, this is where you should aim. I don't need you to make a split decision or a second guess or whatever it is. The data tells us, let's aim here.
Yeah. And there's incredible confidence that comes from knowing that you've aimed far enough away from trouble that an average swing will do just fine. And I think those times when we get really tense on the course tend to come out of knowing or feeling like you have to hit it exactly perfect, or else you're going to pay a heavy price. And it's really a freeing feeling to have an understanding of where the ball is about to go and knowing that average will be just fine.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think that's before we add in anything about the pressure of club competition, club championship, qualifiers, tournaments, all those different things. And if they're going through a practice round, arming themselves with, I'm just aiming here, right? Narrow hole, no problem. It tells me that it's a 2-iron off the tee and I'm going to aim in this spot. I also think it's very cool, and I'm glad you brought it up because it was something that I wanted to bring up. That players who have launch monitors at home, and I know it's not every model, but there's actually a ton of models on there, is that with that information, people can actually export their information and put it into that app. I think that that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that was just, again, as we were building out that feature, something that I was lucky enough to have a golf coach suggest, like, hey, is this possible? And I didn't know how to do it at the time. I said, oh, yeah, we'll make it happen. Let's figure it out. And it came together really quickly. And so, yeah, if you can get your information into a spreadsheet, you can upload to the app. And as I said earlier, that really reduces the amount of time it takes to understand your own game. And I think that's critical to being able to pick up the app, say, okay, this is something I want to use. And you don't have to wait a month or 2 months before you've gathered enough data to start putting it into practice. And I think for the average golfer that's playing once a week, that's just such an important thing.
Yeah, and I know that we've been talking a lot about like kind of talking specifically to the individual. But if we pivot a little bit to talk about golf coaches out there at kind of regardless what level you're at, but now imagine, like, I'm even thinking of my competitive players when I have 6 players that are trying to qualify for the same event, and we're going through a practice round and we're on the golf course with them, coaching them through. I know every player varies a little bit on their dispersion, but for a lot of players, just being able to make confident, data-driven decisions in real time, I think that this is going to be a fantastic tool for golf coaches, whether they're in practice rounds, different things like that. I guess I haven't thought about this. Like, is this something? Can you use this in a competitive round of golf?
So yeah, I've been talking to the USGA to make sure that everything that we're giving to you real time is legal, and so I am eagerly awaiting their stamp of approval. I know the one thing that they have a question on is the strokes gained in the top right corner, is seeing that strokes gained number change real time. Is that is that potentially problematic? And so like I said, I'm awaiting a answer here, hopefully very soon. I've been in contact with them since June, and it's my opinion and argument that what they have there is simply just pre-published data, since it's a static table, not specific to any player, but we'll see what they have to say. So if they come back and say, we want you to make that more generic, I will get in there and I will change that extremely quickly to make sure that that everything is conforming so that our tournament players can use that without any worry.
Right. Hey, Mike, you guys are on Google Meet. I had it in the calendar that I had this going on. So Steven's got a Google Meet link for you guys to hop on to.
All good. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem, man. I think I'm actually going to leave that in the interview.
Why not?
Because like I'm fast forwarding and who knows, who knows when the USGA is going to draw the line or eventually kind of come into what they're going to allow with technology. But like, it'll be very interesting to see when we get to a point where that line is drawn between how much information, how much outside or information can we use to make decisions on the golf course. So I'm very curious to see, but I think even before that, if players are doing this properly, this should drastically change the way that they play, the decisions they make, and the process that they go through. Which is why when I first saw it, I'm like, I need to get a hold of these guys and find out what the deal is here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And we've been having more and more conversations with coaches across the country. We just talked to a great golf coach in Indiana last week who's rolling it out to his entire team. There's basically a golf academy nearby that purchased it for their 40 players, and they're going to work on it this winter so that when they step onto the course for their first tournaments in the spring, they're going to be armed with their data, and they're going to have this different perspective when they step onto the course of really understanding how to look at a hole and how to attack it given their skills. Because I know for me personally, this is an understanding of the game that I've just developed over the last few years, and I built the app to apply the new things that I had learned. And so I think for younger players to see each golf hole through this lens of here's my dispersion, and really a way to attack each golf hole given their skills, I think is going to allow them to play better. As I said, allow them to feel more at ease with the decisions they're making and stop second guessing, stop playing guided by emotions, and really make the most of their golf skill and their golf swing. Because as we know, like, you can have a great swing, but so many other things happen out there that can take away from your ability to score. And so I think this is really going to help people maximize their potential.
Yeah, I was just having that kind of internal thought there of like driver versus 3-wood, right? The amount of times that players will back off of driver because, let's say, to them it's a narrow driving hole. But I wonder how many of those players are going to be able to switch and say it's not necessarily a narrow driving hole. It's I'm not aiming in the correct spot. Because I think, like you said, like the average person, let's say that their driver dispersion is 70 yards. Well, if they were to actually map it out, their 3-wood dispersion is probably 65 yards. And the penalty we pay for missing on a fairway wood is way more severe in terms of distance loss, et cetera. So it's like, I don't need you to club down unless it's a 35-yard hazard to hazard width. I just need you to aim in the right spot.
Yeah, and that decision is one that I think still confuses us a lot as a golf community. There's a lot of, I mean, even the really bright players are still working really hard at this decision and trying to make sense of it. And so, alongside that launch monitor data upload, we built a tool that will take every data point in your dispersion that you put into the app, allow you to throw it down on the satellite image, and then using basically the spread of that shots, show you your average and predicted strokes gained for any club and any target on any hole. So you can go in there with 100 shots in your driver. Okay, if I hit my driver 100 times, here's where those 100 shots will go. And I'm going to average 0.1 strokes gained off the tee hitting my driver. Let me see what happens if I hit my 3-wood. And I think players will be really surprised at how infrequently the 3-wood actually gains strokes over the driver. It's really almost always, and each player can do this for themselves to double check to make sure that this is true for them, but it's almost always a matter of just reducing how far you want to hit it rather than trying to reduce how wide you hit it when 3-wood is the right play.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I hope that everyone that's listening will listen to that part and hopefully have like that little kind of light bulb moment to be like, yep, he's right. It should be driver more often.
Yeah, so, and if it's not driver, it's probably something that goes significantly straighter, which is for almost everybody is not the 3-wood.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah, this has been fantastic. what's coming down the pipeline with shot pattern? Is there anything you kind of share with maybe additional features, or where you think this goes as we roll into 2024 and beyond?
Yeah. So as I've been building this, it's been really important to me to have more questions than answers, to talk to people like you, to talk to golf coaches, to talk to players, to get their perspective, to really stay connected to the people who are in the app and excited about it, and to just continue to build the feature list based on feedback. So if people are listening and they're shot pattern users, or they're interested, or if there's one thing that it seems to be missing that would get them to say yes to it, I am all ears to listen to golfers. And a couple of things that have been most requested are, people want to basically be able to add in a full set of clubs and basically tag every single club in their bag. So we've been building out a model where you can, rather than just being limited to 4 clubs that you use off the tee, start attaching that shot dispersion to every single club across their bag. And then a little bit further down the line is going to be the ability to go in after the round and input your entire round of data in about 5 minutes. I think what we're building is going to be the most seamless shot entry, like shot tracking tool, for the players who don't want to have to the stress or worry of distraction of trying to record that data while they play. They're players who feel like they have a good memory, and if you just gave them a tool where they could go ding, 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 ding after the round, in about 5 minutes, that they would be really happy with that. That how we've built, and how we're building that manual like round entry after the fact, I think is going to be something that people love. It's going to take us a few more weeks, maybe even a couple months to really finish that out, to get it to be exactly what we want. But as soon as we have that, then having access to your full round strokes gain data, having access to any sort of biases, being able to uncover whether you're a player who is in need of speed or in need of like tightening down your dispersion, will help coaches know what to do next. And for someone like you who's working with competitive players, being able to see and talk through the targets that your players chose after the fact by looking at the map with them, like, tell me what you're thinking on this shot. Where did you aim? How do we do this? And really being able to evaluate shot by shot what happened, I think is going to allow someone like you who has a ton of players and you can't see every shot, to actually understand why, if a player is really talented and has a phenomenal swing, if there's something happening on the course that's getting in the way of them being able to score the way they're supposed to. So those are the couple of the big things. And like I said, from there, we listen to our users, we listen to people who are excited about it, and we build the thing that's going to provide the most value to the people who want to jump into the app.
Yeah, I think that, man, you said some really good stuff there. So yeah, like the ability to tag every club and the ability to go back and manually enter, like that's an absolute game changer, I think. And I think, again, we'll just, for the players that want it, we'll arm them with those decisions, or with that data. But for the coaches, like you said, like, unfortunately, whether I like it or not, I see a very small percentage of my player shots throughout the year. And being able to go back either before round or after a round, because like you said, it's often when we have players at pre-event, they're hitting it incredibly well. And the classic coach's statement I'll get from a player, hey coach, I played today, and they always say, I didn't hit it that bad, but like I shot 87 when they normally shoot in the mid 70s. It's always when they say I didn't hit it that bad, but every time I read that, I'm immediately thinking, like, I'm sure we made a bunch of really poor decisions. And now to be able to go through, and I'm going to have players say, oh yeah, I aimed up here, and their tee shot arc is going to put half of that arc into the trees, and say, like, well, what the heck were we doing aiming over there? That's not the spot to be. I hope it can work both ways. And I even wonder, players over time will start to say, okay, well, like, I already know coach is going to ask me, so I might as well just aim where I should anyways.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the hope. That's what we're really excited about, in that, to make those rounds more visible. I was a high school golf coach for 6 years, and one of my biggest frustrations was just that lack of understanding of what happened over the course of 4 or 5 hours for a guy out there. When I've only maybe got to see 3 holes, why did they come in with an 81 versus when I know they're capable of a 72, 73? And where is the opportunity for improvement? And so, because the self-report is always just it lacks the wisdom that a coach is supposed to provide. It lacks, well, you actually didn't get ultra unlucky when the ball bounced here or this whatever lie. It was had you just aimed it 10 yards in this direction, you could have hit the shot you hit and walked away with a par rather than a double. Because that really wasn't a bad swing. It was just a lack of education on where you're supposed to aim it to take account for all the factors at play.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. In the I got unlucky. That's another one. It's like, well, no, you aimed down a 14-foot window. Like that's why it was a really bad decision. Eric, this has been fantastic. Where first off, where can people get the app, and where can people learn more or follow you online, or where do you want to send people?
Yeah, so right now we're iOS only. I should have mentioned that we've had a lot of requests for Android version. So we are going to start working feverishly on that here this winter, and we'll hopefully have that ready by the spring. So right now you can find the app on the App Store. It is called Shot Pattern. And we're still dialing in our main title, but if you search Shot Pattern, you'll find it on the App Store. If you want to learn more about it before downloading it, you can go to our website, shotpattern.app. And then we are on Twitter X, Instagram, and TikTok, all as Shot Pattern. So feel free to reach out, give us a follow. We're always tweeting about new features coming soon, how to best use the app, how to kind of use cases, examples of courses that we see that we think are really interesting, and trying to educate players on how to take advantage of what they're seeing within the Shot Pattern app.
That's fantastic. I think everyone listening, I think especially like, actually, I should have thrown, what's the price for a year? Like the price, I find it to be very affordable, like very reasonable as well.
Yeah, so right now it's $39.99 a year in the US, and that should be pretty comparable around the world. So yeah, that was one thing. Just I felt like the value that I being offered by a lot of the other apps, it wasn't for me. I actually haven't paid for any other golf GPS apps just because I didn't think the value was there. So I tried to build something where it would be a no-brainer, where the value that you got out, because it helped your game, it gave you something that you really couldn't find somewhere else, made it really feel like a great deal in the end for players in terms of how much it helped them understand their game and how to score better.
That's fantastic. Well, Eric, I think Shot Pattern is a must check out for any golfer, regardless of your ability level. If you want to shoot lower scores with a little bit of education, I think it can go a long way. I hope everyone checks out, and I want to thank you for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Me too. Appreciate it, Ryan.
Thanks, man.